أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Welcome, dear brothers and sisters, to ICNA Michigan's ICNA Council of Social Justice webinar today on the topic of Juneteenth on June 19th. So, inshallah, we have a great lineup of speakers, some great scholars, some great academics that we hope to learn from and understand what Juneteenth really is and why it matters and where do we go from here. So, inshallah, the first speaker that I have is Imam Khalid Griggs. Imam Khalid Griggs is from Community Mosque of Winston-Salem in North Carolina. He is a chaplain. He is an executive member of Islamic Circle of North America and the executive director of its social justice department. So today, he would be enlightening us on the subject of what Juneteenth is, why it matters, and what is ICNA's commitment to this, and what should be the greater commitment of the American Muslims to this subject. So, inshallah, without any further ado, I would like to welcome Imam Khalid Griggs.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. I first would like to thank ICNA Michigan for the very thoughtful and informative programs that you all have been doing in conjunction with CSJ. This is another one in a long line of very good programs. ICNA CSJ is committed to bringing information to the community that will be beneficial for our religious as well as our social understanding and commitment of the environment in which we are practicing Islam today here in the United States. Brothers and sisters, I would have to say that the making by the Congress of Juneteenth as a holiday had to take place in relatively lightning speed. On one day, there's a discussion about the upcoming Juneteenth recognition. And I'll say that this recognition grows out of the emancipation, or the declared emancipation of enslaved people in Galveston, Texas, and in the Galveston area in 1865. And we can note that this was 2 years after the official emancipation that was issued, proclamation that was issued by President Abraham Lincoln on January the 1st, to take effect January the 1st, 1963. And so the people of the enslaved people of Galveston, Texas, and in that area got word that finally they were emancipated. And I have to say and so this particular date was a date in which the emancipated persons in that area got their first taste of so-called freedom, or relative freedom. Now, I want to just say at the outset that even though Juneteenth is the oldest running African-American generated holiday or celebration in this country, it is a celebration that recognizes, and for years and years, starting in 1866, was recognized as a regional celebration. It was a celebration that not all emancipated people in the Confederate States recognized, because the Emancipation Proclamation only freed those who were in the Confederate States. Those in the border states like West Virginia and Missouri and the District of Columbia did not fall under this Emancipation Proclamation. And so even though it's the longest running continuous African-American celebration, it is also a celebration that does not have its precedent in other parts of the country.
Hey, Assalamualaikum.
Galveston,
Alhamdulillah. I'm
Texas.
in a meeting. I'll come you guys
Uh,
inshallah.
Galveston, Texas, was not the only area in the United States where emancipated people got a late notice. This happened throughout the country. And as a matter of fact, I'd like to just give one other point, historical point, and that is with the emancipation, the Declaration of Independence, celebrated on July the 4th, every year from 1776, the United States Declaration of Independence from Britain, that the white community, for the most part, was so angry with the celebration of African American people and people of African descent for the July 4th celebration that even during the time of Frederick Douglass in the 1860s, Frederick Douglass, African American people celebrated for the most part July the 4th on July the 5th, so that the anger against them from seeing them dressed in colorful and nice clothing and really enjoying themselves, that they would not be attacked by white people. So I'm just trying to give a significance of having a date that would be celebrated, that was unique to those who were formerly enslaved in these former Confederate states, that it was a unique celebration that had nothing to do with the overall celebration of the independence of the country. I also want to point out, and I don't want to sound like a contrarian, and I'm not saying this to discourage anyone from recognizing the historical significance of Juneteenth and moving forward, particularly as a Muslim community. But I think that I have to point out that this particular celebration and how it has become a national holiday in such a relatively short period of time, meaning how the Republican Party, who has been so obstinate in blocking legislation that would be of benefit to African American people, like the George Floyd Justice Bill and other pieces of legislation, that they have been so obstinate in blocking this legislation, but yet they unanimously in the Senate passed this holiday, this celebration, which is now a federal holiday as of today, as of yesterday, actually. It's a federal holiday. And I just want to point out and give some context to this very quickly. And that is that our dear martyred brother, Al-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz, Malcolm X, has said that the white man, and I'm substituting this is his actual language, and I would say the government, the power structure, will try to satisfy us with symbolic victories rather than economic equity and real justice. And so I say this so that we don't get caught so much in the celebratory and the feeling that all of the needs of the African American community in particular are going to be solved, or that somehow we will take focus off of the issues like police brutality and the murder of African American citizens by a policeman with impunity. If we're going to take focus off of the current voter suppression wave that is sweeping this country as we speak today, that we're going to take focus off of the increasing wealth and gap between white Americans and African American people, which is larger today than it was in the 1960s, or that we're going to take focus off of the cause, the issue of the movement to establish reparations, some kind of tangible requital for the centuries of enslavement that people of African descent have suffered in this country. And with that having been said, I will go back to the point that it is significant in my eyes that Juneteenth is recognized as a celebratory moment for African American people and now for the nation. celebratory with the understanding that we are celebrating another expression of white supremacy, and we're celebrating a delinquent behavior on the part of the citizens, the white citizens in Galveston, Texas, during that period of time to free those individuals that they had enslaved for so many years. So as we put this in a context, any effort to educate the American people and African American people about the history of this country and the debt that is owed to African American people in this country, it is something that we should feel good about. But we should understand, and that good feeling about this particular celebration and now this federal holiday across the country, that it does not lead towards solving the systemic and structural issues that are plaguing this country even up until this day. Even when the enslavement period for African people ended in the United States, 1865 for the majority, and then across the country, because in Massachusetts and in South Carolina, there were many states and many pockets within states where the enslaved population was not informed and did not start acting as if they were free people, free from chattel slavery, until months and sometimes years after the Emancipation Proclamation. And so, as we recognize this event, let's recognize how much further we have to organize and how much more we have to try to push the call for not just recognitions like Juneteenth, which is, as I say, it's a very good recognition, but tangible, concrete efforts to try to address past and present inequities. And so, with this having been said, I will welcome very much our comments from our dear sister Aisha al-Adawiyah and our brother Imam Dawud Walid, the executive for CARE, and sister Aisha, of course, the director of Women in Islam. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah khair, Imam Khalid Griggs. Excellent points. I was taking some notes. So, inshallah, we hope that you will be able to join us for the question and answer session that we have. We hope to have at the end of the speakers. So, for the viewers that are watching us live, please make sure you send us your questions, and we will get all the speakers at the end together in a panel style and raise those questions for them to answer. So inshallah, we will move on to our next speaker, Sister Aisha al-Adawiyah. She is the founder and executive director of Women in Islam, and an organization of Muslim women which focuses on human rights and social justice. She is an organizer, she is a consultant, she is a guide outside and inside our community for Muslim women, and especially those of the African American descent. So without any further ado, I would like to invite Sister Aisha al-Adawiyah to join us and share some discussions and some points about the historic events that led to Juneteenth.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Well, thank you for inviting me to join you in this conversation. I think that Imam Khalid has given us some historical references to point to. So I would like to say, I'll start by saying that Imam Khalid took my Malcolm X quote because I was going to lead with that. Because I do feel that this is another instance of just that, an appeasement, and especially the speed at which this holiday, was given to us. So one sister said that she said, "Thank you for the holiday, but as a gift, she would like reparations." So I want to amplify that. And one of the comedians said also that uh, this is the first it's historic because it's the first holiday that we have, federal holiday, that it is illegal to teach the reasons why we have Juneteenth in the first place. So I thought that was poignant. So I think that your audience will probably understand where I'm going to come from. I think that we are always given appeasements, never anything of substance. And while I appreciate and applaud the people who work for these kinds of initiatives, historical initiatives, hopefully they will be able to be shared in our classrooms where our children are being taught. And all too often, they are not taught about the history that underpins a lot of the holidays that we have. So I hope that this will not be one of those cases, but that we'll be able to push through and make sure that we are able to teach the historical context, of these holidays. And I'm reluctant to say celebrate even because we're still in this trench here. Uh, we are seeing so many black people being shot down in the streets, as they walk. So to be able to celebrate anything at this point, it is quite baffling for me. So I just don't want us to fall into the trap of being appeased that, oh wow, we have another holiday that is toothless, quite frankly, when we have states passing legislation, laws that say that we can't teach about the history, of these events. So I'm really challenged to be in a celebratory mood at this point. So again, I don't want to disparage anyone who is inclined to celebrate this event, but at the same time, I'm very cautious and at some point quite critical, of how it came to us so suddenly without any kind of forewarning or anything to the public that this was even in the pipeline. So again, we know that this administration has demonstrated very early on its reluctance to address some of the really very pressing issues, like the George Floyd bill that Imam Talib referenced, and so many others that are on the table, I mean, there's clemency that can be given to political prisoners, who are languishing in jails, political prisoners. One comes to mind very frequently for me is Imam Jamil Amin. I mean, the, these people can be released if for no other reason that they are elderly persons and they deserve that. Not to mention the fact that they are innocent in the first place. The prisons that are overflowing with our young people who are now elders on marijuana charges. That they are still in jail, but now uh, entrepreneurs are even on the stock market with businesses allowing them to legally sell marijuana products. So there's a lot that we have to consider, and what were the forces driving this current administration to think that this would be a priority for us, to the utter exclusion of more life saving, life threatening events that are before us today. So my message is caution. Take 2 days off, 3 days off, whatever we feel we need, and certainly we deserve. Don't be blindsided by these cosmetic gestures that are given to us. And again, I want to say that I am uh, admiring the people who struggle for this kind of symbolism, because symbols do matter, but we have to control the narrative. So, inshallah, um, I'll stop here and give Imam Walid a chance to chime in here. Thank you so much.
Jazakallah khair, Sister Aisha. And rightfully so. A lot of things that you pointed out, especially with relation to the symbolic gesture and just that about Juneteenth. Hopefully we can continue this discussion. But next up, I don't want to take any more time from our very own local Imam Dawud Walid. He's Executive Director of Michigan Chapter of Council on American Islamic Relations, CARE, Michigan. He's a member of the Michigan Muslim Community Council, MMCC's Imam Committee, and a senior fellow at Auburn Seminary. Very well known, well respected, an author and an academic. So, inshallah, Imam Dawud Walid, if you would join us and talk us through what the future holds for America in context of the race relations. Imam Dawud, you're muted, so please, if you can unmute.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين أفضل الصلاة وتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. First of all, let me thank ICNA Social Justice for hosting this very valuable discussion, and also for my elders, Imam Khalid and Auntie Aisha. May Allah preserve them both in their leadership. And it's not surprising that what both of my elders said, I agree with, and we're all on the same page with what was said previously. So I think that I will also keep my comments pretty short, as both of the previous speakers did not take their full allotted time, so that we can field some questions and comments from our brothers and sisters in the viewing audience. So, as the future, what does the future hold for race relations in the United States of America? And, obviously none of us has knowledge of the ghaib, of the unseen, but we can somewhat make forecasts of what's going on based upon the trajectory of where our society is heading. But before that, we want to root all of our discussions in the Quranic ethos and the Quranic paradigm, right? And we know that the Qur'an is a timeless book, and those things that took place that are referenced in the Qur'an are a roadmap for what is to come, and how we should look at the societies that we live in and how to address things accordingly. So a very important point for us as Muslims, and not to get caught up in other people's discourses, let me say this, that from the part that we should play, I believe, in us moving forward. The Quran has 6,236 ayat or verses. And only about 10% of the Quran deals with what is called ahkam, meaning rulings or laws. So the overwhelming majority of the Quran doesn't deal with the halal and the haram, or doesn't deal with overt rulings of the sacred law, right? The majority of what the Quran is calling to is faith, and also the refinement of the human beings, which leads to ethical life, because there cannot be ethical life in society without people working on and dealing with their inward selves. And so is it true of the issue of racism. And I mention this for a reason, because no matter how many proclamations or how many holidays or how many laws the American government may pass, racism fundamentally starts off being a spiritual issue or a spiritual malady. And racism cannot be legislated away. And we have to be very clear about that. Yes, I mean, personally, I'm in favor of reparations for the descendants of the enslaved Africans in the United States of America. I mean, I'm in favor of that. I'm definitely in favor of the Reform Act that has been put forward, named after George Floyd, who was just one of countless amount of African Americans, males and females, who've been murdered at the hands of law enforcement. I'm definitely in favor of that. I'm definitely in favor of further reform of mass incarceration. Further reform of laws that lead to mass incarceration and disproportionate amount of Black Americans, and also, let me say, Native Americans, who are the two most incarcerated groups per capita in the United States of America. There's no doubt about it. But these laws in and of themselves, even if they were to pass, right, don't fundamentally deal with the inward issue of the spiritual maladies that reflect people or that deal with people. And one of we see that in the Quranic narrative, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions Fir'aun in the Quran, right, who is the archetype of oppression. And by the way, Fir'aun just simply means an emperor or a king of the Egyptian people. Fir'aun, just a title, right? Allah didn't even honor that pharaoh by mentioning his name, though many would say it was Ramses II who was that actual pharaoh. There are many pharaohs, right, as far as kings, but this is a particular type of Fir'aun, a particular type of pharaoh. His scheme was to divide the people, right? So he divided his people, the Egyptian people, from the children of Israel, or some would say the Hebrews or the Israelites. And then he also sowed division amongst the Israeli people or the Israelites themselves. And this is an old tactic. And if we go back to the history of the United States of America, and even the founding of what was initially called Jubilee Day and later became Juneteenth, is Jubilee Day, right? And our people were very spiritual and first named this based upon the Hebrew Bible. And as the Jubilee is mentioned in the Hebrew Bible, is the release of Hebrews who were enslaved, right? So this is a religious or a biblical reference to Jubilee Day, which then later became Juneteenth, as now has been enshrined to a national holiday, right? But it was that time that the Fir'aun of that time and the people who were in his court sought to divide the people, right? And even though the average Egyptian was not benefiting as much as the pharaoh and the royal court, and even to a degree, some of them were even marginalized. But the divide and conquer tactics was, well, the poor Egyptians, at least you're not as bad off, or at least you're not those Hebrews or those Israelites, right, who were made to toil and work as enslaved people. And thusly, in the United States of America, that tactic and that scheme was used to divide Europeans who were formerly indentured servants from enslaved Africans, poor whites, which, by the way, a very small percentage of white people actually own Africans in the antebellum South. Like 90% of white folks weren't landowners who had plantations who could own enslaved people, if my numbers serve me correctly. But it was used and even before them with Bacon's Rebellion, right? That after Bacon's Rebellion failed in the colony of Virginia, in which Africans who were indentured servants and chattel, but many of them were indentured servants. Like all African people didn't come here as chattel. As a matter of fact, the early Africans that came here, even after the colonies, many of them were not chattel; they were indentured servants, just like Irish people. But it was a divide and conquer tactic that was used to for those who were the elite, those who were the ruling class, those who were in power. They would hold on to their privilege and to their power, and they would use and try to divide the white people who weren't on their socio-political level, to use them and to keep them divided from the African people, so that they would not rise up against the ruling class. And as far as I can see here in the United States of America, and we have these diversionary tactics that are being done, as both the Imam and Auntie Aisha mentioned, and symbolism does have importance, but I view these things as well as diversionary tactics. That you have this divide and conquer tactics that are being used to divide people who are white and in rural areas who are not doing well, dividing them against Black people and other people who are non-white people. Social engineering that's used to even divide Black people amongst against other Black people based upon gender and educational level, to have people bickering and arguing amongst themselves to try to get the Black woman to be at war against the Black man to be adversarial towards the Black woman. All of these things go back to the old playbook of the Pharaoh or the Fir'aun, and even the reconstruction or the evolving of whiteness, right? Like, whiteness is an evolving construct, and it's always expanded historically. Irish people and Irish Catholics weren't considered white at one time in America. They later got their white card, right? Jews didn't have their political white card in America, but now we see that Catholicism is considered to be American or white religion. At least we have colorblind laws regarding religion, but we know that Islam is, for the most part, considered a non-white religion. Well, Catholicism is considered a white religion. Judaism, for the most part, is considered to be a white religion. So this thing expands. So now you see, and I'm in actually Florida right now visiting family, but you have this issue, and I can see this very clearly, of Latinos, especially white Latinos, where there's a move to try to, with the Cubans, and we have Cuban Americans like Ted Cruz, who are aspiring to represent a new type of whiteness, so they get absorbed into whiteness, right? There were a number of Arab Americans who were jockeying for their white card, but 9/11 killed that for overtly people who are overtly culturally Arab, especially for Muslims who are Arab, right? So I view that on the one hand, there's a level of heightened racial consciousness that has come back up in the American society in 2020, 2021 that we are in now. And from my understanding, before I was born, there was a heightened race consciousness in the late 60s and early 70s that came about, and these things ebb and flow. But we should expect that there's going to be forces of capitalism, forces of people who want to keep a white hegemony, who are going to seek to expand whiteness, and want to continue to divide the people in the pharaonic type of game plan to keep people divided amongst themselves. And I think it's our job as Muslims that we have a roadmap of the Qur'an, we have a roadmap of the Sunnah, that if we strive to embody as a community the issues of racial equity, of this type of what we could say social egalitarianism inside the Muslim community, not just in speech, but in deed, that we can help serve as a model of spiritual healing for the United States of America. But it's not us adopting the language of the woke, of canceling all white folks, or picking up other sorts of discourse that's going to bring healing to America. As a matter of fact, that is implicitly and unknowingly actually playing into the playbook of Fir'aun and Pharaoh's minions, who are in the Democratic and Republican parties, and they're not just Republicans, right? They're wolves and they're foxes too. With that, I'll conclude with my comment. Wa'fa minkum, please pardon me.
Jazakallah khair, Imam Khalid Walid. So inshallah, we have wrapped up the speakers and their comments and their discussions. I would like to invite all three of our speakers for a open panel discussion, questions. Alhamdulillah, we had all the speakers touch on different aspects, so it was very beautiful. I have jotted down some questions. There are some questions that are coming in through the viewers as well. So if I may start with the first question for Imam Khalid. So Imam Khalid, I was, this is with respect to some of the points that you touched on. So I was yesterday, or I believe 2 days ago, we had a corporate event where we were discussing Juneteenth, and one of the coworkers mentioned that their classmates back in college from South Carolina was telling how they were taught the Civil War, not as the Civil War, but as, I quote, war of northern aggression, right? So, I mean, what I wanted to ask you is that what role does education play in all of this, and how should we approach it very mindfully?
Yeah, thanks so much. That's a very good question, and an honest comment from the person who actually asked that particular question. You know, the thing is, education has so many facets to it, and there's so many sources for us to be educated. And I think primarily what African Americans and many others in this country have suffered from has actually been formalized education, but it's been a miseducation. And so it doesn't, so the education that we need right now is the education of actual history, historical fact, to bring forward those, and we're talking about African American history, to bring forward out of the dusty archives, which everything is digital now, Sister Aisha, so I know that. Yeah, but we need to bring these things forward. We need to start looking at those who recorded the history during the time as it was happening, and be more critical in our reading and what we're consuming in the name of education. I think that, to a fault, has been a major problem why not just African American people, but the process of critical thinking has been just removed for the most part in our educational system. You know, it's I grew up in a Southern Baptist church, and many churches throughout the South, and I don't know if it was limited to the South, but I know in the South we had what was called a watch night. And this watch night, and it may just be in the Baptist tradition, but in this watch night, it was the day, the morning before, or the night before New Year's Eve. And that Emancipation Proclamation was so of critical importance to descendants of former enslaved people, and it had a religious time. So in the churches all across the South, you had this watch night going on, and you know, my family and so many other families were spending their nights in church, waiting for that 12 o'clock hour where we can say, well, this is January the 1st, not just shoot off firecrackers, but this has historical significance for us as people of African descent. And so I think that when we delve deeply into the history, we will be rewarded by what we find, and we can quit passing on some of this, superficial and even erroneous history oftentimes. So education is important. It's critical, but the kind of education that we get is more important than just the volume or just exposure.
Absolutely. Education that is based on facts and not propaganda.
Yeah.
So my next question is for...
May I comment
Yes,
briefly
absolutely.
here?
Absolutely.
I think that I agree with Imam Khalid's comments. What I want to add is that we need to find a way to the word Sankofa keeps coming to me time and time again. There's something that we need to go back and get. Yeah. And one of the things that I'm remembering is that, well, as young Muslims coming into the religion, we understood very clearly, and certainly our predecessors, long before that, uh, understood the value of creating alternative educational models, right? Because we knew that we were not going to get what we needed to survive and thrive in the larger scheme of things. So I'm again advocating that we do that because we know that academia is not going to deliver us liberation. We know that. There's one scholar who wrote this wonderful book because many of our people who are very proud and, of course, make tremendous sacrifices and contributions, and the struggles that they've made to attain a formal academic education, right? But without the necessary critique of what it is that they are imbibing, right? So that we see the replication time and time again of the same narrative because there is no critical thinking and there is no courageous will to challenge the obvious um, lack of clarity and, quite frankly, honesty that we bring back to the classroom, to our families, to our communities, and to our society. So I want to say that because I see more and more, our young people, our children, going into elite universities, and they come out brilliant, in these areas. But there is something that prevents them from challenging the status quo. Yeah. And when they do, we understand and they know that they will become targets. So, how do we mitigate this? I mean, what is it that we need to do in order to bring about real change? And I think it starts with, Carter Dixon talked about the miseducation of the Negro. So I insert here the miseducation of the Muslims as well, because we are carrying that burden as well. And I'm also reminded of this book that Dr. Green wrote about the post-traumatic slave syndrome. There are a lot of nuggets in there that we need to go back and look at. So again, yeah, education is important, but knowledge is superior. Yeah. So what does it mean to go to a university, get all of the highest degrees, and then come back into the community and do what? Yeah. So I see us as having a challenge before us, and especially with younger generations, that when we send our children to these universities, and then what is it that they are able? Because the community has to also stand by them, and before that, they have to have had a foundation, to stand on. And without that, also, it's not fair to even expect them to take any kind of position that would even attempt to challenge the status quo. So I know that I'm going to go all over the place here, but this is where I am, and I think that it's where we are as a community we need to start challenging what it is that we are being given. And I'm referencing now the holiday that we've just been given, but the laws that have been passed in how many cities around the country now that forbid, that outlaw the teaching of the very foundation of why we have this holiday in the first place. So something is amiss here. We need to start asking the question, what is that?
Jazakallah khair. And if I may add, for someone from an immigrant culture, Arab, Desi, it's also to learn from, I mean, we don't have that experience that, and life experience that you guys of our African American leadership have. So I think to learn to have these kind of discussions is also very important, other than just relying on pure academics from elite universities. So,
but you have a colonial experience.
yes,
and they're all cousins and sisters and brothers.
Absolutely.
So we need to untangle all of that.
Yep. So next question that I have is for Imam Dawud Walid. Imam Dawud, you kind of touched upon some of the socioeconomic aspects of the racism and the race relationships in this country. What I wanted to ask you is that we know that this country was built on foundations of these imbalanced, unjust socioeconomic relationships, from redlining to busing, and that's all. That building is there, right? So how do we cover that gap now, or how do we, try to dismantle that and address that?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So, just to cut through the chase, it's hard for any group of people to give anyone who's thirsty something to drink in their cup if their cup is empty, right? So, I mean, we have a lot of work to do inside of ourselves, right? And as Auntie Aisha just made reference to, this just isn't an issue of mental conditioning of the descendants of enslaved Africans, but for all Muslim people who immigrated here, who were colonialized by the French or the British or the Italians, whoever, we can pick the colonial master, right? And we have to see how we work as communities by our trying to live the American dream. We are profiting off of the marginalization of other people, right? I don't mind being controversial, but I'm just going to make a just very quick point, right? So, like, it's the irony did not escape me while the community has been calling for justice for Palestine, especially with these latest brutal attacks. That the majority of liquor stores in the Black community are owned by Palestinians, right? And then that money that's being earned is being sent back to people's family members in Palestine, right? So in the name of capitalism, one group of oppressed people who came here under oppressed conditions are profiting off of the indigenous, or the people who've been here longer, that have been oppressed, right? So it's like we have a lot of things to sort out. I also think that the seerah of the Prophet alayhi salam is very important and instructive of the brotherhood, sisterhood compact, about how we have to be very purposeful in pairing people off, especially with our youth. The issue of education that was mentioned, the issue of putting people into positions in our community, in institutions and masajid, that don't look like us, but who are qualified. Like Bilal just wasn't the muezzin, the Black guy with a nice voice. He was the treasurer. He was Khazin Beit Mal. He collected the zakah for the Prophet ﷺ, right? So it's like we have a situation in many of our cities that our masajid are really cultural centers masquerading as masajid, if we want to be honest about it. I mean, so we have a lot of work to do internally. As Dr. Sherman Abdul Hakim Jackson says, Hafidhullah Ta'ala, that hard work is the hard work. So we have a lot of things to sort out. So again, yes, let's protest for Palestine. We have one in Detroit next week. I'm all down for that. Let's protest against police brutality. But we're doing these things kind of like in fractured ways. But until we get serious about healing inside the Muslim community, of dealing with the social, political, economic exploitation that Muslims are doing against other people of color, including other Muslims. When we talk about inequities in our imbalances in our masajid and Islamic institutions, when we talk about the issue, and I've dealt with this all the time as an imam in the community. I mean, forget so-called immigrant against black tension. I have to deal with the issue where someone comes to me crying who's Bangladeshi, who wants to marry someone who's Pakistani, and they get turned away because they're Bangladeshi, like Desi on Desi racism, right? Like when we're dealing with these issues right underneath our nose, but then we're talking about trying to fix America. It's almost comical in a sense, right? So we have a lot of work to do amongst ourselves, right? And Allah knows best.
I want to jump in there again because I'm known as a staunch advocate for the Palestinian cause, right? But my caveat is that Al-Aqsa Mosque is there, you know, and this is the third most sacred site for Muslims, right? So when we talk the fact that we are 3 billion or however we are globally, right? And there's no recognition or even a voice argument about the fact that one of our most sacred spaces is ransacked, right? And then we move to another conversation about religious freedom without any acknowledgement or courage to even name the atrocity. Then, you know, I claim that as our issue as well. So I just want to put that.
Jazakallah khair. So, Sister Aisha, I have a question for you, and this is something that has come up time and time again, you know, in terms of protest, and you know, there was a video that I was watching where this was in someone's play card. It said more Black Americans are in jail than were enslaved, and this is very sobering, very something that should boil our blood, especially in context of the 13th Amendment. So, and then you mentioned about, you know, the Juneteenth holiday, but we still have Georgia passing voter suppression laws. We still have Philadelphia doing the same. 14 congressmen voted against even just this token of Juneteenth. So I guess my question to you is, you know, leaving this official tokenism aside, as individuals, as Muslims, as a society, what are some you know, tangible actions for us to partake in? I mean, apart from the education that we discussed earlier.
So what was the question?
What are some tangible actions as individuals, as a society, as Muslims that we can pursue?
Well, I think first and foremost we have to start with our own families. You know, we first we have to educate ourselves, and when I say educate, I mean educate, right? And then we have to make sure that our children are similarly educated. They have to have a foundation so that when they enter the society, they have some preparation about what it is, what are they called to do. And again, I'm saying we cannot rely on the establishment to solve these issues. We have to solve them ourselves, right? And then hold accountable again those people that we send to elected offices to represent us, to hold them accountable across the board. Because, you know, no color barrier, no ethnic, nothing. Whoever goes to those offices, we have to be the ones to insist that they represent, or they have to be challenged for their lack of representation for the community. And again, I want to say that we have a lot of Black and brown faces now in high places. But what is it that they are able to really deliver? What is it? You know. So again, I'm challenging us to be honest about this. It's nice to say, this one's from my community, or they look like me, or whatever other references we can bring. But in the final analysis, and I know this from first-hand experience, that too often once they enter these lofty places, they are effectively silenced, and that doesn't serve our community. So we have to rethink. We have to rethink our role in society. And of course, we make choices every day about the job that we're going to take, right? But we also have to recognize that we have a responsibility, to give back something. But again, uh, the appeal is very seductive, you know, to sit at the table, not realizing that, not only are you sitting at the table because you think you don't want to be on the menu, when in fact you are the menu. So we have some hard questions to answer for ourselves. And I hope that as we love our people, everybody who stands for liberation, freedom for all people, justice, equality, compassion, that's who we are, right? At the same time, we have to do something else. Just because you're sitting in the office, in the high place, doesn't mean that you've arrived. And you have a responsibility to respond to the critique that the community brings, because the community is the one that put you there in the first place. So I know there's a lot to unpack. So we'll make it easy for us to see our role in the society and to give us the courage to speak truth to power, and then raise our children at a very early age about what that means to be a viable citizen of the community, and what role you're going to play with that. And again, that starts at a very early age. It does not start when you get to graduate school. Right? That starts before you're in kindergarten. Your parents have to be the model for that. The community has to be the model for that. And I think that we're falling short on many levels in that regard. So may Allah help us in this way.
Jazakallah khair. It reminds me of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where he said that you'll be huge in numbers, but you will be like the foam in the river. So may Allah allow us to unite and organize to address these injustices. So, Khalid, we are at the top of the hour. So I just have one quick question for you.
Sure.
For a lot of our viewers, and I think it was mentioned in this discussion as well, the concept of reparations. So in real quick, if you could highlight what it is, what it means, just so that for our own education and the education of our community.
Yeah. Reparations, as it relates to African American people, is that process that is put in place and actually delivered to, first of all, let me say that no African American person living today or in the future could be properly recompensed for the almost 400 years, 350 years of slavery in this country. You just can't do that. You can't come up with a figure. So it's more than just a financial, a dollar and cents. I think too often some of the opposition comes in people's mind when you just think that you're just going to write checks, huge checks to Black people and just let them go and do whatever they want to do with it. Money, the financial part, is a part of it, just like with all of the attention that's been paid to what happened in the Greenwood section of Tulsa in 1921 with Black Wall Street. That was generational wealth that had been established in many of these banks and these businesses that were owned by Black people. Then not only were those businesses stopped, most of them burnt to the ground, the people run out of town, they were killed. And so there's so many episodes in US history that when there was an opportunity for Black wealth to be put together and be very beneficial, not just to the present generation, but future generations, the rage that white people, many, not all white people, but many white people continue to carry against seeing who they may perceive as being undeserving people to share in the wealth of this nation, disregarding how the engine that drove the accumulation of wealth in this country, which was slavery. So reparations is a conscious attempt, it's a recognition, first, that something has been terribly done wrong, that these people, people of African descent in this country, have been denied the opportunity to not only just accumulate wealth, the means of wealth, the entire process of denying this accumulation of wealth that justifies descendants of African people receiving some kind of first recognition and some kind of financial or material remuneration, whether it's college scholarships, but I say that money should be a part of it. And I just want to add very, very quickly that reparation is nothing new in this country. As a matter of fact, in 8.5 months before Lincoln signed the Declaration of Independence, 8.5 months before that, he signed an act in which enslavers, plantation owners, were given reparations for their so-called property, meaning us, that they lost as a result of slavery being taken away from them as their means of getting rich. And they were given reparations all across the South. The Union, those the victorious ones in the Civil War, so-called victorious ones in the Civil War, through them, monies were given to Southern planters to try to, for reparations for the property that they lost, to try to win their support for this plan of Reconstruction, to try to mute their opposition against allowing African people to be free and to live their lives and have land and property and all this other stuff. The federal government and state government, through the federal government, they were given money as reparations. The nation of France, up until, and I know this is another country, but just one of the grossest examples of reparation that I can imagine, that I know historically, when the island of Haiti gained its independence through struggle in 1804, the French government said, okay, well, we won't punish you, we won't stay after you, but you have to give us reparations. And this went on to the tune of billions of dollars, all the way up until 1947, this nation. And how did they pay for all this money they were asking for? The French government, in their largesse, they were so nice that they had the French banks loan them the Haitian government money to pay back to the French government. So it's absurd for folks who have that kind of history to come forward now and to say that you know, what are you talking about reparations? You know, we didn't have anything to do with it. Well, okay, well, fine. Give me your house, give me your car, give me your bank account, and you know, we can just start at that. You know, the government didn't have to give it. So it's an absurd argument, in my opinion, against some form of first recognition, which ain't enough, but some form of recompense for the labor, the force-free labor that people of African descent gave to this nation from the time of the transatlantic enslavement of African people and through all of the periods of black codes, Jim Crow, you know, segregation, all the way up until today.
Jazakallah khair. Wow. So, you know, of course, whenever I have this discussion, I am the one to take in, you know, to learn a lot from all you scholars. And, you know, I hope and pray may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserve you and you know, keep you benefiting for our communities. So inshallah, that we come to a conclusion of our Q&A. Jazakallah khair, Sister Aisha, Brother Dawood,
Thank you.
Khalid, Jazakallah khair. I really appreciate it. Our viewers did as well. So to close this up, Imam Dawud, if you don't mind just making a short dua, so inshallah we will wrap that.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring our hearts together in love. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to not have us be a people who are divided. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to have us hold on firmly to the Qur'an and to the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We ask Almighty Allah Azza wa Jal to make us be a means of healing in the United States of America. We ask Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us be a people of justice and to make us not be amongst those who further marginalize and add on to the injustice of other people. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وسلم الحمد لله.
Assalamu alaikum. Jazakallah khair. Inshallah we'll speak